The freeloading ends today. That's what my husband Ethan said the evening he came home with his big promotion. His voice was calm, measured, the same tone he uses in conference rooms when he's about to deliver news he's already decided is final. We'd been married 7 years, together long enough for me to recognize that tone. It wasn't a discussion, it was an announcement. I was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of creamy mushroom risotto. The kitchen smelled of garlic, thyme, and white wine slowly reducing. I remember the wooden spoon moving in slow circles, the soft pop of steam against the lid. I didn't turn around right away. I just kept stirring. Ethan's dress shoes clicked across the hardwood floor. Deliberate, evenly spaced. He set his new leather briefcase on the counter, the one his mother had gifted him for this exact milestone. Then he cleared his throat. Sophia, we need to talk. I turned off the burner and faced him. He was still in his tailored navy suit, tie perfectly knotted, hair neatly combed. He looked every inch the successful man he'd worked so hard to become. And for a moment, I was genuinely proud of him. I always had been. I got the promotion, he said, as if I hadn't already seen the excited text he'd sent earlier. Full of confetti emojis. It comes with a substantial raise. And I've been thinking about our finances. I leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely, waiting. I'd learned over the years that silence is sometimes the most powerful response you can give. He went on, voice steady, rehearsed. The way we share the joint account, it doesn't feel fair anymore. Not with the difference in our incomes now. I think it's time we separate everything. Financial independence, clear boundaries. You keep what you earn. I keep what I earn. We split household expenses 50-50. The word he didn't say out loud hung in the air anyway. Freeloader. I could hear his mother Evelyn's influence in every syllable. She'd been planting that seed for years. Subtle comments at family dinners about how lucky I was to have a husband who carried the load. How teaching wasn't really a career, the way corporate was. Ethan had never outright agreed with her before. Not until tonight. I looked at him for a long moment. His eyes held that quiet triumph people get when they believe they're doing something strong. Something righteous. Okay, I said quietly. He blinked. Okay? Yes, separate accounts. You keep your income, I keep mine. We split living expenses down the middle. That's what you want, right? He hesitated, searching my face for anger, resistance, tears, anything he could label as unreasonable. But there was none, just calm agreement. Yes, he said finally, relief softening his shoulders. Exactly. I turned back to the risotto, added a knob of butter, stirred until it melted into glossy perfection. We'll go to the bank tomorrow then, I said over my shoulder. Make it official. Thank you, he replied, and there was real gratitude in his voice. He thought he'd just won something important. He kissed the top of my head on his way to the bedroom to change. The way he always did after a long day. I plated dinner. We ate mostly in silence. The new kind that had been creeping in over the past year. He scrolled through emails. I watched him, memorizing the moment. Because in that quiet kitchen, with the scent of risotto still warm in the air, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just clarity. For the first time in years, I saw our marriage exactly as it was. And I knew, without drama or tears, that everything was about to change. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I sat at the small desk in the corner of our bedroom, the one he sometimes teased me about, calling it my teacher's nook. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the city outside. I opened my laptop and started pulling up old bank statements, one by one. I've always been the kind of person who keeps records, receipts in labeled folders, screenshots of transfers, even little notes in the margins of bills. Ethan used to laugh about it. Why save all this junk, Soph? He'd say. I never really answered. I just smiled and kept doing it. Now I was glad I had. Over the next 2 nights, while Ethan slept or worked late, I went through everything. 7 years of marriage, every dollar, every expense, every quiet contribution I'd made so our life could run smoothly while he climbed the corporate ladder. I was a high school English teacher. Steady job, good benefits, but not the kind of salary that turns heads at family gatherings. What people didn't see were the private tutoring sessions I took on, evenings, weekends, sometimes early mornings before school. Wealthy parents who wanted their kids to write better college essays. Professionals who needed help polishing presentations. Referrals that kept coming because I was good at what I did. Reliable money that flowed in quietly, month after month. That money paid for a lot more than anyone realized. I covered the difference in rent every month so we could stay in the nice downtown apartment Ethan loved showing off. Over 7 years, that alone came to more than $50,000. Utilities I paid without a word when he forgot, and we nearly had the heat shut off one winter. Internet, water, groceries when money felt tight after his big purchases. Then there were the gifts. Christmas and birthdays for his entire family, thoughtful ones. The kind Evelyn would open with a dramatic gasp and say, "Oh, Ethan, you shouldn't have." Anniversary dinners at places with linen napkins. The new couch he bragged about to his friends. The repair on his car transmission 2 years ago. Even his gym membership, the expensive one downtown, that he'd asked me to handle one busy month, and somehow I just kept handling. I added it all up, line by line. The numbers climbed higher than I expected. Nearly $420,000 in direct contributions from my income alone. Not counting the hours, thousands of hours, spent cooking, cleaning, planning, remembering, organizing, the invisible labor that kept his life frictionless so he could focus on work. I wasn't bitter while I worked, just awake. For years, I'd told myself it didn't matter who paid for what. We were a team. Love doesn't keep score. But it does when one person starts keeping score for you. Ethan had begun to see my teaching as small, less real than his corporate job with its titles and bonuses and corner office. And Evelyn had been whispering in his ear for years, subtle digs about how I was lucky. How he was carrying us. How one day he'd be in a position to stand on his own. Now he was, and the first thing he wanted was distance from me. I saved everything to a USB drive, printed the key pages, slid the folder into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not for revenge, not even for confrontation yet, just because the truth deserved to be preserved. I looked at the final total one more time before closing the laptop. My income hadn't been small. It had been the quiet foundation our polished life was built on. Trips we took, furniture we owned, the image of success he presented to the world. And still, he'd called me a freeloader. I turned off the light and slipped into bed beside him. He was sleeping deeply, one arm flung across the pillow. I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, feeling the space between us grow wider than the few inches of mattress. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just done being invisible. Sunday rolled around faster than I wanted it to. I was up before dawn. The apartment still wrapped in that soft gray light that comes just before sunrise. Ethan was sleeping in late these days, blaming the new role for his exhaustion. I moved quietly through the kitchen, pulling out the heavy roasting pan, trimming the herbs I'd grown on our tiny balcony. Roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with toasted almonds, Evelyn's favorites. I'd been making this meal for years whenever she visited. It was expected. It was tradition. By noon the whole place smelled like a home out of a magazine, warm, rich, inviting. I set the table with the good plates. The ones Ethan had picked out because they looked impressive. Everything was perfect, the way it always was when his family came over. They arrived right on time. Evelyn never tolerated lateness. She treated it like a character flaw. She swept in first, trailing a cloud of expensive perfume and that familiar air of judgment. Richard followed a step behind, quieter, carrying the bottle of wine they always brought as if it balanced out everything else. "Ethan, darling," Evelyn called out, ignoring me completely as she made her way to the living room. "You look wonderful. The promotion suits you." Ethan smiled, accepting her hug. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." I nodded from the doorway. "Hello." Richard gave me a small, sympathetic smile, the kind that barely shows but says I see you. "Smells incredible in here," he said softly. Evelyn finally glanced my way. "What are we having?" "Your favorite," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Roast chicken." "How thoughtful," she said in that tone that always meant the opposite. We sat down. I brought out the platters, sliding into the role I'd played so many times, the quiet facilitator. The backdrop that made Ethan's success shine brighter. Evelyn dominated the conversation from the start. She wanted every detail about the new position, salary increase, company car, office view, future trajectory. She cataloged his achievements like trophies on a shelf. Not once did she ask about my work. my students, my life. Ethan didn't bring it up either. I ate slowly, watching them. Richard caught my eye once and lifted his glass just a fraction, a tiny gesture of solidarity from someone who'd long ago learned silence was safer. Then Evelyn reached across the table, took Ethan's hand, and said it. I'm so proud of you. Sweetheart, finally, you can focus on your future without someone draining you dry. The word landed like a stone in still water. Draining, as if I'd been taking something I hadn't earned. Ethan shifted in his seat, glanced at me quickly, then away. He didn't correct her, didn't defend me, just gave a thin, uncomfortable smile and changed the subject to the new office coffee machine. And in that moment, something inside me settled into absolute certainty. This marriage wasn't broken, it was already over, it just hadn't been declared yet. I stood up slowly. Excuse me, I'll check on dessert. I walked to the kitchen, hands steady, heart strangely calm. Behind me, Evelyn launched into another story about Ethan's childhood brilliance, another reminder that he was destined for greatness. I pulled the apple pie from the oven where it had been warming, homemade crust. Cinnamon still fragrant. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the golden lattice, thinking about the USB drive in my desk drawer, thinking about tomorrow's bank visit, thinking about how long I'd been playing a supporting role in a story that was never really mine. I carried the pie back to the table, smiling politely as I served it. Evelyn complimented the crust. Ethan thanked me quietly. But inside, I was already somewhere else. Already preparing to step out of the shadows for good. Monday morning came in soft and ordinary, the way big changes often do. I woke up before Ethan, slipped out of bed without waking him. His suit from yesterday was still draped over the chair, tie loosened like he'd collapsed into sleep the moment he got home. I made coffee the slow way, French press. Hot water poured in stages, because even on a morning like this, I refused to let the small ritual slip. The aroma filled the kitchen while the city stirred outside the window. Ethan appeared 20 minutes later, already sharp in another power suit, hair damp from the shower. He poured coffee into the travel mug I'd given him years ago, the one engraved with his initials. He didn't say thank you. He hadn't for a while. Good morning, he said, checking his phone. Good morning. My voice was neutral, polite. He paused mid-sip. We're still going to the bank after work, right? Yes, 5 o'clock at the main branch. He nodded, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, maybe because I hadn't fought it. Hadn't dragged my feet. People who expect resistance often mistake calm for surrender. The day passed quietly. I taught my classes, met with 2 tutoring clients, answered emails from parents, steady work that brought in good money, more than Ethan realized. Because he'd stopped asking long ago. At 4:30 I drove to the bank alone. The lobby was all glass and polished wood, the kind of place designed to make money feel friendly. I sat waiting, watching people come and go with their own private worries. Ethan arrived at 5:15, tie slightly loosened, looking distracted. Sorry, he muttered, still scrolling emails. Meeting ran long. It's fine, I said, and it was. A kind-eyed banker named Jennifer called us over. She was professional, warm enough without crossing lines. You'd like to separate a joint account into 2 individual ones? She asked. Yes, Ethan answered quickly. Financial independence, separate checking and savings. We'll split household expenses 50-50. Jennifer nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. And the current balance in the joint account? Ethan turned to me, expectation clear in his eyes. He was waiting for me to be reasonable, to take less, to smooth things over like I always had. 50-50, I said calmly, an equal split. His eyes widened. What? Equal, I repeated, unless you've contributed more than half over the years. Which you haven't. Fair is fair. He glanced at Jennifer, cheeks coloring slightly, uncomfortable arguing in front of a stranger. Can we discuss this privately? There's nothing to discuss, I said, voice still even. This is what you asked for. He hesitated, clearly trying to recall exactly how much I'd put in over the years. He couldn't. He'd stopped paying attention a long time ago. Fine, he said at last, jaw tight. 50-50. Jennifer's expression stayed neutral, but I caught the tiniest flicker of recognition in her eyes. She'd seen this before. We signed the papers. New accounts were opened. Cards would arrive in a week. Direct deposits would be rerouted. And household expenses? Jennifer asked. We'll split them 50-50. Ethan said. I pulled out my phone. Then we should track everything transparently. A shared spreadsheet. Ethan blinked. A spreadsheet? Yes. I opened Google Sheets right there. Created columns. Date, item, amount, who paid. I shared it with his email. Fresh start this month. I saw the moment it landed, really landed. This wasn't him gaining independence while I quietly carried the load. This was actual equality. We left the bank separately. He mumbled something about another meeting. I drove home alone, windows down, city lights starting to blink on. For the first time in years, the evening ahead felt entirely my own. The first few days after the bank visit felt almost normal, like nothing had changed, but it had. The shift was quiet, small, deliberate. I simply stopped doing the things that had always been taken for granted. That first evening, I cooked only for myself. A simple pasta with olive oil, garlic, and the last of the balcony herbs. I ate at the counter with a book open in front of me. Ethan came home late, tired, expecting the usual, a plate kept warm, dinner ready on the table. You already ate? He asked, surprise in his voice. Yes, I said. I was hungry. There's some pasta left in the pot if you want it. He stood there for a second, looking at the stove like it had betrayed him. Then he served himself, microwaved the plate even though it was still warm, and couldn't find the parmesan because he'd never learned where I kept it. We ate in near silence. He checked emails between bites. I finished my chapter. Afterward, I washed only my own dishes. His plate sat in the sink. It wasn't petty. It was just clarity. Kindness that isn't seen stops being kindness. It becomes something else entirely. Over the next week, the small changes added up. I stopped making his morning coffee the way he liked it, strong, with just a splash of cream. I stopped packing his lunch on busy days. I did my own laundry and left his pile untouched in the basket. One evening, I took a strip of painter's tape and ran it down the middle of the fridge. Left side mine, right side his. Fair, transparent, exactly what he'd asked for. Ethan stared at it like it was a foreign object. Seriously? You wanted separate, I said gently. This keeps it clear. He didn't argue. He just nodded and closed the door. Grocery shopping became his responsibility for his half. His first trip was chaotic. He came back with rock-hard avocados, bread that went moldy in 2 days, a whole chicken he didn't know how to cook. That night he stood in the kitchen staring at the raw bird like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. How do you even do this? He asked. There are recipes online, I said, not looking up from my laptop. He ended up ordering pizza. Again. By the end of the first week, he was eating takeout almost every night. His side of the fridge stayed half empty or filled with things that went bad quickly. He spent more on food in 7 days than I did in 2 weeks. I ate simply, well, cheaply, salads, eggs, things I could make in 10 minutes. He started looking tired, not just from work, from life, from having to think about the basics for the first time. One night, close to midnight, he came into the bedroom where I was reading. The mattress dipped as he lay down beside me. We stayed on our own sides. A careful distance between us. Are you angry with me? He asked quietly, voice small in the dark. No, I said honestly. Anger would have been easier. Hot, loud, something he could fight or fix. You're just different, distant. I turned to look at him. Streetlight filtered through the blinds, striping his face. You wanted financial independence, I said softly. It comes with emotional independence too. We're roommates now, splitting bills. Isn't that what you asked for? He was quiet for a long time. I didn't want to feel like I was carrying everything. He said finally. That's the story you told yourself. I replied, turning away. Now you don't have to. I went for a run the next morning, something I hadn't done in years because I'd always been too busy handling everything else. The city was still quiet, air cool against my skin. My lungs burned at first, legs heavy, but I kept going. When I got back, sweaty and alive, Ethan was in the kitchen fumbling with instant coffee. He looked at me like he didn't quite recognize the woman walking through the door. Since when do you run? Since I don't have to make your breakfast anymore. I walked past him to the shower. And that was how the unraveling began. No fights, no screaming, just the quiet removal of all the invisible threads I'd been weaving for years. One by one, they snapped. And Ethan was finally starting to feel the weight of what was left behind. 3 weeks into our new arrangement, Ethan mentioned, almost casually, that his sister Claire and her husband James were coming over for Sunday dinner. If this had been the old normal, I would have spent Saturday grocery shopping, planning a menu around what everyone liked. I'd have been up early Sunday finishing a roast, making fresh rolls, setting out the good wine glasses. It would have been effortless because I'd done it 100 times. But this time, Ethan brought it up while I was at my desk, reviewing a student's essay. You know Claire likes to eat right at 5, he said, standing in the doorway. I didn't look up right away. I'm not cooking, I said quietly. He laughed a little, like it was a joke. What do you mean? They're coming tomorrow. I mean I'm not cooking. Your family, your guests, that's your responsibility now. The room went still. I could feel him staring at the back of my head. Sophia, come on, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. We have separate finances, your side of the family, your expense. I'm happy to eat whatever you prepare. His face shifted through several shades, confusion, frustration, then something close to panic. But you've always. I know what I've always done. I interrupted gently. That was before. This is now. He opened his mouth, closed it, then walked away without another word. Saturday evening, he went grocery shopping alone. He was gone for nearly 3 hours. When he came back, arms full of bags, he looked shell-shocked. How do you even do this every week? He muttered, dumping everything on the counter. Too many choices, total chaos. I just smiled and kept working. Sunday at 5 sharp, the doorbell rang. Claire and James walked in, Claire sniffing the air immediately. Where's the roast? She asked, half teasing. I don't smell roast. We're having something different tonight, Ethan said weakly. The dining table held cold cuts from the deli, coleslaw in plastic tubs, bagged bread, and a slightly dented store-bought apple pie. It looked sad under the chandelier. Claire stared at it like she'd walked into the wrong house. What is this? Ethan tried to laugh it off. I handled dinner tonight. Claire turned to me. I was sitting on the couch with a book, legs tucked under me, completely uninvolved. Sophia, what's going on? I didn't cook, I said cheerfully. Ethan wanted to take care of it himself. Claire's eyes snapped back to her brother. You wanted to handle it. Ethan sighed and started talking. He told them everything, the promotion, the separate accounts, the fairness, Evelyn's influence, the spreadsheet. He laid it all out like he was explaining a reasonable business decision. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Claire started laughing, not kindly, sharp, incredulous laughter that cut straight through the awkwardness. Let me make sure I've got this right, she said, wiping her eyes. You and Mom convinced Sophia, the woman who's run this house, taken care of you, cooked, cleaned, planned every family event for 7 years, that she was freeloading? Ethan muttered something defensive. Claire grabbed her purse. James, we're leaving. What about the pie? James asked, eyeing the dented box. We'll eat somewhere decent, Claire said. She walked over to me, bent down, and kissed my cheek. Well played, Soph. This should have happened years ago. Then she turned to Ethan. You have no idea what you had. None. The door closed firmly behind them. Ethan stood in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by plastic containers and limp sliced turkey, looking like the floor had just dropped out from under him. I set my book aside, walked to the table, and gently placed the thick folder I'd prepared weeks ago in front of him. No drama, no slamming it down, just the soft sound of paper meeting wood. Everything's in here, I said calmly. When you're ready. He didn't open it yet, but I knew he would. Ethan didn't touch the folder that night. He just sat there in the dining room long after Claire and James had gone, staring at the cold cuts like they were evidence of a crime. Eventually he went to bed without a word. I stayed up a little longer, cleaning only my own space, then turned off the lights. The next evening, he opened it. I was at my desk when I heard the rustle of papers behind me. He'd brought the folder into the living room and spread everything across the coffee table, printouts, highlighted totals, neat columns of dates and amounts. I didn't say anything, I just let him read. Page by page, his face changed, first confusion, then dawning realization, then something that looked a lot like shame. When he reached the final summary, nearly $420,000 in direct contributions. plus the estimated value of years of domestic labor. He let out a slow breath. I didn't know, he said quietly. His voice was hoarse. I mean, I knew you paid for things. But I didn't see how much. I really didn't see. I know, I said, not accusing, just stating the truth. He rubbed his hands over his face. What can I do? How'd I fix this? I looked at him for a long moment. I don't know if it can be fixed with one conversation. Ethan, 6 months of waking up won't erase 7 years of being made invisible. He nodded slowly, shoulders slumped. The next day, his phone rang while we were both home. Richard's name flashed on the screen. Ethan put it on speaker without thinking. Richard's voice came through low and direct. I heard what happened with Claire. And I've heard the rest. Ethan stayed silent. Do you remember who planned every holiday? Every birthday? Every family trip? Richard continued. Who made sure you lived comfortably while you worked long hours? It was Sophia. All of it. I didn't mean. Intent doesn't erase consequences. Son, you called that freeloading. You let your mother say worse. Then, softer. To me, Sophia, I'm sorry. I stayed quiet too often for the sake of peace. That wasn't fair to you. The call ended. Ethan sat frozen, head bowed. For the first time, he looked like a man who truly understood that love isn't automatic. It has to be seen, named, protected. I stood up, rinsed my coffee cup, only mine, and left the rest for him to learn on his own. 6 months later, I woke up on a Sunday morning to the quiet sounds of someone else moving in the kitchen. Not tense or hurried, but calm, measured, the soft clink of a spoon against ceramic, the low whistle of the kettle, the faint scent of properly brewed coffee drifting down the hall. I lay there for a moment, listening, then I got up and walked to the doorway. Ethan was at the counter, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with a steady rhythm he hadn't possessed before. Peppers, onions, spinach, prepping a frittata with the herbs from our balcony. He'd been practicing, a lot. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled, a real one, warm and unforced. Good morning, I'm trying that herb frittata you showed me last month. Thought we could eat on the balcony. Weather's perfect. Sounds good, I said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs without thinking. It felt natural again. He'd changed, slowly, stubbornly, one small action at a time. After the folder and Richard's call, Ethan didn't make grand promises. He just started showing up. He watched cooking videos late at night, took notes, burned things, tried again. He grocery shopped with lists now, still forgot items sometimes, but less. He did laundry carefully, separating colors after the gray disaster of his first attempt. He vacuumed without breaking anything anymore. One evening, exhausted from a long day of managing everything himself, he sat down heavily and said, I don't know how you did this every day. Work full-time, run the house, keep everyone happy. I looked at him. I did it because I had to. And because no one else did. He nodded, letting the weight of it sink in. Evelyn started therapy, Richard's quiet ultimatum. She still slipped sometimes, but she caught herself now. Apologies came, awkward but genuine. When Ethan was offered chief of operations, another big raise, he came home and sat across from me first. I need to talk to you before I accept. More hours, more pressure. I won't do it if it pulls us back to where we were. We talked it through like partners. Boundaries, help with cleaning, shared planning. He took the job only after we agreed. That Sunday, Evelyn and Richard arrived with a bag of food Evelyn had cooked herself. I brought sides, she said, a little sheepish. Figured you might like a break. Thank you, Ethan said, and he meant it. Later, on the balcony, Evelyn sat beside me. I owe you more than one apology. Sophia, for years of unkindness, you were always generous, and I wasn't. Her voice shook slightly. Thank you for saying that, I said, my throat tight. That evening, as we cleaned the kitchen together, him washing, me drying, talking easily about the day, Ethan paused. What do you think about closing the separate accounts? Going back to joint, not because we have to. Because I want transparency and partnership. Real this time. I looked at him, hands in soapy water. You sure? I've never been more sure. We hugged right there, dishes half done, coffee cooling on the counter. Some stories end in fireworks and goodbyes. Ours ended in quiet choices, day after day, to see each other clearly. To value what had once been invisible. and to build something stronger on the truth we'd finally faced together. Healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, every morning, over coffee on the balcony. We're still here. We're trying. And that's enough.